So yes, Argentina. For those that were here last month, we went through Malbec, the various forms of Malbec. So this month we have tried to avoid Malbec as much as possible. There might be a teensy weensy bit of it, and I've just noticed my cloud. I'm going to take that down. It's a bit big. Yes, Argentina. It's sort of become synonymous with Malbec, but there's so much else to it that we wanted to show you. Must apologise about the first wine. I don't know if Dan wants to explain what happened or not, but the first wine was meant to be an Argentinian wine, and for the eagle-eyed of you on the sheet, it's actually from Uruguay. Quite simply, the wine that we were hoping to show you didn't arrive, and then our plan B was out of stock. So I was in Italy when we realised that the wine wasn't ready, so I panicked and bought something from Uruguay. Because it's a really nice wine, and it's hopefully something to see what could potentially be Argentinian going forward. I'm going to take my hat off. This was the closest I could get to an Argentinian gaucho look, but it's hot now.
I'd just like to say for wine number one, it was all planned. It was all part of it. It was all
completely
planned. We just wanted to show you, some other parts of South America, and as you say, the grapes that might find their way into Argentina. It was always part of the plan.
I said I would only come if you showed a white from Uruguay. It's my fault.
Yes, it's Susy's fault. Let's go with that. Thank you. So yes, I have just realised one thing that hasn't been mentioned on your sheet is what the grape variety is, but I think it does say it on the box. Yes, so we've got an Albarino. I didn't annotate Uruguay on the sheet because I didn't know we were having it, I'm afraid. So Uruguay is just the little country just to the right of Argentina. So we'll just explain a little bit about it and a little bit about the wine before we go back to Argentina, if that's all right. Oopsie. I've just made a mess to start with. That's not a good...
Really aromatic.
Mm. I love the colour as well. The colour is...
Dan, could you take over? I just need to go and find a pair of scissors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by the Albarino in Uruguay. I mean, we all know Albarino is obviously northwest Spain.
Yeah.
I didn't know they grew it in Uruguay, but then I don't know much about Uruguay.
Well, so I think it's northwest Spain, as you say, and also northwest Portugal, where it is called Albarino. Yeah, so very, very similar, but same grape variety. And actually it headed over to Uruguay in 1954. That's when it arrived in Uruguay. And it was because of settlers that came, or immigrants that came from northwest Spain, so from Galicia. And they came over to Uruguay, and they brought with them their grape variety.
And I mean, it's quite interesting. At the moment, they're trying to make it in New Zealand, aren't they, as well? There's a bit of interest in it internationally.
Yeah.
So I think we will, fast forward 5 years, we're going to see quite a bit more Albarino that isn't from Galicia, from other parts of the world.
Well, we tried one from south of France as well, didn't we?
I've had one from South France, which is very good because there's various people. The Germans claim it was Riesling originally. The French claim it was a clone of Chardonnay somewhere along the line. So it's got a very varied background if you look into it.
Well,
but Uruguay's really is.
So if I could add into that,
of course.
Yes. So apparently, from ampelographical evidence, it's not related to Riesling. So apparently they think it's probably related to Gros Mansang. So they think it is indigenous to Portugal, but it is in some way related to Gros Mansang. And it's because Riesling, so this apparently dates back to the 12th century, Albarino, whereas Riesling only comes from the 15th century.
Well, there you go. Who knew? Dan. So just a little bit of brief background about Uruguay while you taste the wines. You can see it just sat to the side of, just to the east of Brazil there. Most of the vineyard area is around Montevideo, which is kind of the pointy bit of Uruguay on the south coast. And unlike Argentina and its other neighbour Chile on the other side of the Andes, it's really, really flat. The highest point in Uruguay is only 514 metres above sea level. So it's actually extremely flat and it's very alluvial. So grapes love growing there, basically. And if you look at where it sits on a parallel, it's right next to Mendoza. It's also on the same line of latitude as Stellenbosch and Barossa. And we know how well they are doing for wine, so it makes complete sense. You've got beautiful spring to summer, well, spring to autumn sunshine. You can regulate your temperatures with airflow from the sea, and you've got that coastal influence. It makes complete sense that it is going to be one of the next big things, really. And in terms of winemaking in South America, it's Argentina, then Chile, then Brazil, and then Uruguay.
And of course, it's it's the red grape Tannat that I've come
of course,
from Uruguay, which can be pretty tough, but they seem to be taming it a lot more these days. And there's some really good, soft, more mellow Tannats around now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's with Tannat, they've changed the way the winemaking, haven't they, so that they can soften it up, so they're not making it in the same way as the French. Just going back onto the Albarino, Pip, you're saying sort of like, and Susy both mentioned sort of the different places that are growing Albarino. If you're familiar with Albarino from northwest Spain, the prices there are sort of creeping up and up and up at the moment. It's becoming more and more expensive. So actually finding these alternative places for Albarino, Portugal, or here in Uruguay, or even New Zealand, it's good. What do we think?
I like it a lot. It's lovely, rich colour, very aromatic, very scented. It's nice to start with a very aromatic wine, isn't it?
Mm.
And then, good kind of incisive acidity. Nice grapefruit, bit of light peach. Very good. I think one of the reasons that the Spanish Albarinos are going up in price, clearly it's in fashion. And we all know that's the first thing that puts prices up. But also I hear that the restaurants of Madrid and all the big cities in Spain, they grab all the Albarino. There isn't that much of it. Yeah. And so the prices shoot up and up and up.
Yeah, we've really noticed that. So Dan and I have been to Provine, we've been to other wine buying things, and I'm in charge of Spain at the moment, and that's something that we've really noticed is the Albarino, Spanish, Rías Baixas Albarino.
That's why in future events Pip is going to be referred to as Franco.
Why?
Because you're in charge of Spain.
Oh, okay. Right, thanks. Sorry.
That's the political satire joke of the night.
Yeah, clearly.
Deep appreciated.
I'm in charge of Spain. Yeah, I just realised how that sounded. I run Spain. Okay. I've been tasked with looking after buying for Spain. That sounds better. From Spain, not for Spain. And we really have noticed the price of Albarino just go absolutely through the roof. So we're actually looking for, Dan mentioned Alvarinho from Portugal, and we have places like Uruguay, which are also doing Albarino, but they're on a sort of cheaper price point, which is, we're all looking for that at the moment, aren't we? Which is good.
I think Albarino from New Zealand is going to be cheap anytime soon. So
no, not at all. No. But I think I love the texture on this. It's so mouth-filling, and as always, I know we always ask you guys, can you put your wines in the fridge please, and then take the reds out a couple of hours beforehand. I don't put mine in the fridge, because my house is so cold, I don't believe they need to go in the fridge, but also I like to taste wine when it's not fridge cold, so I tend to leave mine out. And just the texture on this is wonderful. It's so mouth-filling, it's so aromatic. Yeah, Elaine, you've got that peppery quality. I like that you're putting your name in brackets so we know it wasn't Linda.
I would say white pepper rather than black pepper.
Well, I mean, I think Elaine is an excellent job there, given that Lyndon's already told us that they both got cold, so they can't taste anything. So well done for getting the pepper there, Elaine.
So we're getting fruits as well, quite peachy, melon.
Yeah, I think a bit of peachiness, apricot going on there,
and wonderful floral notes. And this is a perfect opportunity to say my mantra again, which for those of you that haven't joined us before, you will hear this a lot if you join us again. Wine is my first passion, but food also always has to follow very, very closely behind. And I have a very, very simple rule when it comes to what food you should be eating with your wine. If it grows with it, it goes with it.
Yeah.
So
how many food and drinks have evolved together.
Definitely. And if we're going to sort of where we all know Albarino to come from in Rías Baixas, you can be stood in the vineyards on the hillside, look down to the sea and you've got the little boats coming in the morning, and by the time you've hiked back down the hill to the restaurant, you know that that's lunch. Everything is so fresh.
Hake in particular, Maluta.
Yes, excellent
Love
hake.
Albarino. Oh, with a slick of olive oil and some roast red peppers. Jobs are good.
Yes. And I know Dan has been very, very culinary.
We have some roast red peppers that we can see if they work with it.
But
Unfortunately,
you also have some ceviche.
I said I couldn't get the freshest hake, but what I could get was fresh monkfish from
I didn't realise that.
yes, from Brixham. So we have some fresh monkfish to try with the Albarino. Would you like to?
Is this courtesy of Rockfish?
No, this
Deliveries?
is Jackson's. So small fishmongers in Newton Abbot. So we can try that and see how that pairs. Well, anybody else got any food there that they've decided to pair with their food with their wines today?
See, this is where salted crisps would come in really, really well, because there is a slight salinity in the wine, and you often find that when something has been grown by the sea, you get this salinity, this slight salty, briny quality. So to have it with food that you would season with salt makes sense. You've got acidity, so to have it with food that you would season or cure with acidity, so lemon or lime juice, makes sense. And it's from the sea, so have food from the sea. It makes sense.
But this one is not. Sometimes they're very restrained. This one's quite exuberant, isn't it? So it can stand up to. We've got red onions and a bit of chili. Is that certainly coriander in there? And it's actually standing up to it.
You said the wrong word there. I'm out. I'm glad I didn't come around for tea now.
What is it about coriander? I've got a friend who can't.
It's a gene, apparently. You either have it or you don't, and if you have it, it means that coriander just makes everything taste like soap.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I didn't think that our fish tasted like soap. But,
no, it's delicious.
You're fine. You don't have the gene. There you go.
Some people really hate it. I know that. Yeah.
Oh.
Chris said whole cheddar with it, and I can see how that, because it's quite salty, isn't it? You've got the sort of those quite firm grains of salt with it, but the creamy.
But mine isn't Wookie Hole. It's just Lidl, but I'm going to give it a go nonetheless.
That's delicious. Really good.
Yeah.
Good first match.
That's really interesting, actually. I would never normally put, a rich cheddar with an Albarino, because, as Susy said, they're often much more restrained and austere. But that has got so much texture, so much richness, that actually that works.
And I think it's worth. I know we've said it before, but for those that haven't been on it, if you not used to sort of wine and food pairing, people think automatically to put cheese with red wine. So many people would say put cheddar with red wine, but we say it all the time. Actually, white wines match much better with cheese.
If you think of the fundamentals of food and wine matching, you want to sometimes cut through fattiness and richness. You sometimes want to complement flavours, and then occasionally we want to contrast, and that's where you often do something sweet and something salty. But most cheese is basically fat and acidity, so you want something to cut through the fat and balance the acidity, and white wine has much better properties to do that than most red wine does. It's not to say all red wine doesn't work, but certainly you can take it as homework if you like. Just try more white wine and different cheeses. Get friends round, have it over the weekend. Lots of different white wines, and then buy.
Saturday, yes, brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Buy cheese from where the wine is from, and that you will realise that reason why things work together. Oh, was Hugo seen a squirrel?
Agreed.
No, what happened there was the cat tried to attack the chicken. The chicken jumped in the air, and the dog got shocked by the movement.
Wow,
so,
country life, hey?
Menagerie. Things keep going past the windows. What heck? That's like a zoo.
We have a peahen as well somewhere.
Oh, pretty.
So going back to this Albarino, I would think once we finally get some lovely warm weather, I'm thinking barbecued prawns. Big shell-on barbecued prawns, bit of garlic. That will stand up to them, because the lighter Albarinos you often get from Ries Weichers won't, but that will.
Yeah, definitely.
Bring on the
What's the
sunshine.
verdict generally? Do people like it?
Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Oh,
Many thumbs up.
Lots of thumbs up there.
We even got Batman thumbs up. That's a proper approval. I like this. Yes, Lisa's wearing a Batman t-shirt.
Oh, right, okay. I don't think he's in our view.
Oh, I like to go to gallery so I can see everybody's pretty faces.
Shall we move on to wine number 2?
Next. So actual Argentina now, this time.
Back with the plan.
Yes. And this is quite interesting, isn't it? So the name of this one, so
we like this,
is Jackot, so Jackot. And the reason it's called Jackot is because it's Tokai backwards. And this grape variety used to be called Tokai Friulano. And it's originally from Italy and Slovenia. But those that maybe know their dessert wines, they'll know that Tokai is also the name of a very good dessert wine from Hungary. And in sort of 2007, 2008, the Hungarians got very upset about the fact that people might confuse these dry, light white wines with their very deeply coloured sweet wines. So they said you can't do that anymore. And so
consumers are stupid, Dan, that you obviously can't see the difference between the two wines.
Wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. Yes. But so what they did was they cleverly reversed Tokai and called it Jackot. So it's just Tokai backwards. So that's where the name comes from. But the grape variety is now known as Friulano, which is why Jackot is in speech marks. So what do we think?
Unusual to have this grape from Argentina. I mean,
Yeah.
I utterly would equate this with Northern Italian style. Really interesting that you've dug this one out. And all
Thanks. We found it back in March, didn't we, at a trade show, and thought, oh, we must use that for the Argentina tasting.
Yes.
And actually, the organisation, the Piedra Negra, black stones or black pebbles, it literally translates to, because it's to do with a lot of the volcanic soil that they found in the vineyard. These were one of the founding fathers, if you like, of winemaking in Argentina. And they realized that if you go up in altitude in Argentina, you get better vines. And then they use the meltwater from the Andes to help to irrigate, and they've sort of built channels to come down, because otherwise it is basically a desert. It's semi-desert where they are. So they use the meltwater to irrigate, and that's why they can now grow grapes there. Now I have a small challenge for Dan. So the person who essentially runs the organization here is a chap called Francois Lurton, which isn't a particularly Spanish name. He is originally French, and he's made wine all over the world. But when he first got to Argentina, and this particular part of Argentina, he recognized that the soil was very similar to a specific part of Bordeaux, which is where he previously used to make wine. And I'd like Dan to tell you what the name of that is, because he can't say it.
Is this Pessat Léon?
Yeah. Pessat Léon, which I've probably said wrong as well. We
say onion at the end. Léon.
Pessac Léon.
Yeah.
But that's why he identified this area as being really good for winemaking, because it reminded him so much of France, basically.
So if only Seb was booked on, actually. So those that join us regularly may know Seb, who's one of our regulars who comes along and is actually French, but he's not, although he's booked on, he's not actually joined us. So we can't, as normal, ask Seb for the correct French pronunciation.
No, Seb's our go-to French.
Our go-to French pronunciation.
So I'm just going to look at Christopher's comment. Interesting that this one doesn't work with cheddar. No.
It's so different, isn't it? This one.
It is different.
It's so different.
As well with the monkfish, but what it does do is it teases out the chili more.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean, chili and wine is just endlessly fascinating. Some wines subdue it, some wines pull it out and emphasize it.
Well, I've just had mine with some.
Yeah,
I've just had mine with some rather ripe brie.
Oh.
And it's delicious with brie.
Sounds good.
It brings out more of the florals. So what are people getting? Because Tokai, it is an aromatic grape variety. It's quite a light. When you have it from northern Italy, it can be what's the polite word? Neutral, I think, can be a polite word for it.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Neutral.
there's all of these indigenous grape varieties, aren't there, in Italy. So there's a wonderful array of indigenous grape varieties. And every sort of 10 miles or so, you sort of seem to find a new one that pops up. But quite often, they haven't made it out of Italy for quite good reason. And it's because they can be a little bit sort of
but then,
exciting.
Pinot Grigio is the most boring example of the Pinot Gris grape in the world. And go to Italy if you want to see how boring Pinot Gris can be, or just go to your supermarket. For 49 rubbish. But Pinot Gris in Alsace and New Zealand, fabulous stuff. So the Italians can make very boring wine. But this is lovely. I really like this. It's got some nice, slightly buttery texture to it. Certain richness to it.
I'm glad you commented on the texture, actually, because I have some information about that. It has 30% of it has been finished, not fermented. It's fermented in stainless steel, but 30% of it was then put into second fill French oak barrels, but really quite big, like 2,000 litre barrels, and it stays there for 6 to 8 months, which just gives it a wonderful creaminess from axing on the lees. Yes, exactly, Alison. But also after that, they then put it into concrete eggs. And that's where it has its lee stirring. And if Dan can make me host, I have a picture. For if anybody hasn't seen the concrete eggs, I can show you what they look like if I can get my screen sharing to work.
So Pip has a wonderful picture of a concrete egg, and
But it's also worth pointing out as well. Something we haven't talked about really is called the diurnal variation. Diurnal variation means the difference between daytime temperature and nighttime temperature. And in this area, it can be sort of 15 to 20 degrees, depending on the time of year. And it's that difference that really builds the aromatic, having really quite hot heat in the daytime and then really cool evenings. That's what gives you a very long, slow ripening, but it also encourages the complexities and the nuances, the subtleties. So this is the kind of wine that every time you go back to it, it will give you just something a little bit different. This is much more floral now from when I first tasted it. And then having it with the brie, it brings out more of the texture.
Is this wine made at very high altitude, or have you already said that?
It is 1,100 to 1,500 meters.
Wow. So that's why it's cold at night, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there we are. I'm right. Check amongst yourselves while I do my final.
Just whilst Pip does that, so it also comes from an area called Los Chacayas, and Los Chacayas is the first region in Argentina to get the IG certification, so basically protected graphical indicator. So what you would in France refer to as, say, the appellation, the AOC. It now can say on the label Los Chacayas, and only wines from that region can come there. But interestingly, actually, the way that they've done that IG is not based on terroir. So they're not saying that there is a particular flavour or a particular style that comes from Los Chacayas. It's merely on the geographical boundary, but saying that this is actually an area where they can grow the best quality grape. So it's more of a quality mark rather than a particular sort of profile that they are protecting here. And this was all started by the chap that Pip mentioned, Monsieur Leton. One
of the original flying winemakers.
Yes, yeah. So he started all over the place, but Bordeaux in particular, from the place I shall not say.
Can you see that?
Just say Léognan.
Léognan.
I'm going to take that onion. I'm just.
Can you see the picture on the telly screen computer? Sorry, wrong word. So I like this. This was actually something I stole off Facebook. So this isn't official photography or anything. This is just something a tourist has taken. But I really liked it because it shows you the barrels and the eggs, and two different types of eggs as well. You've got the sort of classical amphora where my cursor is, and then below that you can see the very small. You can get eggs that are as tall as me, and they're quite big. But in this case, they're really quite little. And what it does is it encourages thermodynamics, so that everything is moving inside the egg, and that's how you're getting almost like natural lees stirring without having to sort of intervene too much. And it's one of those winemaking things that's very new, but actually we can date it back to sort of 8,000 BCE when the Georgians first did it, and we've got evidence of that to prove it. So it's a very young thing, but it's born of something very, very old.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Alison, it was diurnal range is the difference between daytime temperature and nighttime temperature. And the larger that is, the more complexity gets built.
And also, Elaine, you're doing brilliant with your cold. So yeah, smoky. The neighbours had sort of picked up smoky, but there is something a little bit smoky about it. But I don't think we mentioned that. So.
Yeah, there is something slightly savoury, smoky on the nose in particular. But I also get this, like, it sounds like a contradiction, but it's slightly honeyed, which of course top is because it's fully sweet. Then it ends dry, and I always think that's lovely in wine when you get a honeyed quality that then produces a dry finish nevertheless.
It's just honestly, every time I come back to it, there's something else. This is I do hope I'm not the only person that says this, that often white wine you would just sit and drink it, but this is the kind of white wine. Thank you, Nikki and Keith, they nodded, hooray. Thanks, solidarity. This is the kind of white wine actually I would have it at room temperature, and I would have it with food, just to explore how it's changing, how it's diversifying every time you go back to it. It's really interesting. Do you like it?
Very much so.
Got some yeses.
Does anyone
It's fine if you don't be afraid. That's quite all right too. But it's just nice to see, as we said at the top, different things that are coming out of, thumbs up from Rosie, thank you, different things that are in Argentina that aren't the norm, which is good.
I mean, we've already I know the first one wasn't Argentina, but I could well see Albarino appearing in Argentina. I think what's fascinating is when you look at the migration into Argentina, that's what's driven a lot of this, and we'll see it as we go through the range. It's people. So here you've got settlers from Italy who've taken with them their local grape variety, and then we're going to move on to Chardonnay, and that's come from sort of the links with France, and then we're going to move on to and as you go through, it's all these different influences, and I guess in some ways it's sort of similar to what we're seeing in England as well now, where we see all of these different grape varieties, obviously not these ones, but trying, because we have this real sort of dynamism at the moment where we don't quite know what's going to work, and so we keep trying all of these different grape varieties to find out which is the one that's going to be best for its place within either England or here Argentina.
But whereas England is fantastic wines coming out of England now, but rather strapped by being decidedly cool climate, which we can feel today. Argentina has this great range, as Pip was saying. Go up high and you can do the aromatic whites. Go somewhere hotter, you can do the strapping big reds. So they're going to do more diverse wines now, aren't they?
It's very versatile.
Sparklers.
But no, they were I think I found one sparkling wine from Argentina. No.
There's a few. I know Moet's do. They've got their, what do they call it? Shondos, I think they call it. There's a few where big companies have gone out and made a champagne equivalent. I can't remember the name of the other one that I know now.
Chandon is
it's their Argentinian outpost from
Chandos is the sparkly.
Okay. But it's Charmant method rather than. Sorry, we're getting all.
No, but there is one.
It's made like prosecco rather than being made like.
Yes. That is, but there is one, because I used to sell it at Majestic, that was Argentinian traditional method, and I cannot remember the name of it, but that was a long time ago, so they might not even do it anymore. But moving on, if you all want to start on your third wine, the Chardonnay, and I will ask you all a question, because we have covered that Argentina is the biggest wine producer in South America. But where do you think it sits in the world? Well, if you consider how much wine we see from Argentina in the UK. So in put it into context with the other big players. If you want to pop it in the chat or
So we're saying Italy is the biggest producer. That's what we're saying. So if
Correct.
it's the
We're
biggest
talking
producer,
volume.
Volume, I beg your pardon, volume. By volume, where does Argentina sit in the winemaking, what do you want to call it, hierarchy, I guess, spectrum? 15th we've got an option of. Are we going higher or lower than 15th?
I think it's higher than 15. I'm going to go something like 8th is going to be my guess.
It's got to be after Italy, France,
Spain,
Australia, California,
South
South
Africa.
Africa. I'm going to go 9.
It's 4th.
Oh, I was about to say,
Wow.
I'm not a trade journalist.
It's 4th. It may be 5th. It's one of those things where, like, you know, Italy and France switch from time to time, and Argentina and Australia switch from time to time. But yeah, Argentina is.
Chile.
Sorry?
Way ahead of Chile.
We're ahead of Chile. Yeah, ahead of New Zealand. New Zealand's something like 27. China makes more wine than New Zealand. It's
Chile.
ridiculous.
Wow.
But the thing in Argentina is they have a wine called Pais, which is just the Pais. Yeah, they just drink it like the cows come home, and it will probably never ever make it out of Argentina.
Huge variety in Chile as well, where they call it Pais.
Yes,
and loads of it in the southern
exactly the
region.
same thing. Yes.
Yeah, Malbec. Wow.
So there's a lot of wine made in Argentina, which is there for personal, domestic, that's the right word to use, domestic consumption. So there's a lot more wine than we think.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. Every day's a school day.
There you go.
I'm glad I did this now. I've learned something.
Hooray! Me too.
Always learning about wine.
Always learning.
Always.
Never stop.
Yeah.
But this is glorious. I mean, how much, they don't produce a great deal of Chardonnay, do they?
No, but do you know what? So
not that much.
Is quite interesting about the Chardonnay in Argentina. The point you were making earlier is the fact that because you have these massive differences in temperature, in location, here we've got something that is quite Burgundian in style. But you could, in Argentina, make something that is sort of Californian in style, because you have the ability throughout the country to make something with a lot more ripeness if you want
diversity.
to do that.
And also Chardonnay is, for good reason, called the chameleon grape, because it depends what the winemaker decides to do with it. So if the winemaker wants to stick a wine like this into grapes like these into very, very toasty oak barrels, you'll end up with a more American style, won't you? But they've chosen to do it in I would call this brightly fruity, but it's really elegant.
Yeah.
Lovely freshness, gorgeous.
Christopher wouldn't mistake the taste for Burgundy.
No, I think you've got much more tropical fruit than a Burgundy, because you've got more sunshine ultimately. But yeah, Susy's point about the aging, this only a third of this was finished in barrels. The rest was kept in stainless steel. So you've got a lovely combination of the two textures to keep the freshness.
Really good acidity, beautiful acidity.
It's very fresh.
I noticed as well, Chris, that you had asked the question earlier and we hadn't actually replied to it. So just about the alcohol volumes. So,
sorry.
Yeah, Chris asked in the chat earlier and I meant to pick up on it. So just the first wine, number one, Albarino, was 12.5%. The second wine, the Jackot, was 13%, and this one is 13% as well. So,
thank you. I like that comment, Lyndon. Fumey. Oh, Elaine, sorry. Fumey.
I like that.
Yeah.
I get, like, when you grill pineapple, or you
on caramelized
pineapple, or pineapple that you get at the bottom of that pineapple upside down cake, but again finishes dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, lovely texture.
So I have got some chicken empanadas, which I thought might go with these. We'll see. And see how they go.
The cheddar will work as well, Christopher. Sorry, speaking with my mouth full.
And I made these myself today. It took me hours to roll the pastry.
Crimp the edges.
Or if anyone's got any like roast chicken left over, or piece of camembert, anything, because it's got that little bit of oak use, it can handle stronger flavors and richer textures.
Terrific Sunday lunch roast chicken wine. I mean, really lovely. And also, I'd say fresh salmon.
I should point out I've been very busy earlier today, so I have to stop at M&S to get bits. I'm going really classy with M&S popcorn chicken bites.
It's okay, because we've got a KFC bucket under the table.
We did. The dog's eating it. It's
Yeah, Hugo's had it. It's actually really good, I have to say.
I do. I like this one from the first time I tasted it. And it always sort of upsets me a little bit when. So number one, I love Chardonnay. I think Chardonnay is a wonderful grape when it's done well, but people do often overlook it because they have these associations with sort of the really sort of horribly over oaked Chardonnays that used to be very popular. Sort of in the 80s and 90s. So I love a Chardonnay, and I love it when we buy a good Chardonnay. This one has been one that I've really enjoyed, but people don't buy it enough. That's the problem. And then we have a lovely one that I gave you a bottle recently, Pip, the lovely one that we have from Australia. The Simon is a superb Chardonnay. And I met the winemaker Charlie, and we tasted it together.
Do you have a picture?
I don't have a picture. I can find a picture of. No, my phone's died today.
Sorry, for those that have just met Dan this evening, Dan is very good for just, what's the equivalent of name dropping, but with photos? Just said, oh, this is me and JP when we met in the vineyard. So I'm surprised he doesn't have a picture of this winemaker.
Charlie looks like Sideshow Bob from the Simpsons. He's got great big red hair that sticks out here. And these really loud clothes that he wears, but he's the quietest man you'd ever meet. It's sort of his persona doesn't quite match the presentation. But you taste these wines, and they're like I say, I love them, and it's so disappointing when they don't move as quickly.
But they are food wines, aren't they?
Yes,
They're food wines. They're not aperitifs. They're not let's get together and guzzle a bottle without any food. They are put on the table with the, dare I say, in April with the blooming Christmas turkey. They're fantastic wines with that. They stand up to everything. But proper English roast chicken, British roast chicken, Sunday lunch wine. This is for me.
Yeah,
cracking.
And I think just going back to I know, Chris, it's not quite Burgundy.
No.
It's got similarities. Sorry, I missed that. Then was there a reaction?
Chris just put that you don't get popcorn at Berry Brothers. I said they've got no class. That's why. Little private joke. Carry on. Carry on.
So yeah, so just saying on that one. So it's this, sort of it's got a Burgundian sort of essence to it. And I think things like this are wonderful to find when you look at what's happening in Burgundy. You look at where the prices are going. The 21s are going to be, like hen's teeth to get hold of. And when you can get hold of them, I know I've said it before, they're going to be incredibly expensive. So finding alternatives, if that's what you would have at Christmas, and we talk about Christmas, but if that's what you'd normally have at Christmas lunch, well, this is a wonderful alternative to have, and at an affordable price point in comparison to what you would be getting from Burgundy. I think this, I can't remember off the top of my head,
22.50 mixed six.
Yes,
yeah.
22.50. What you'd get out of Burgundy these days, 22.50 would be
disappointing.
Yeah, would be very disappointing.
But banging on about barbecues again, because I'm determined to do a Sundance here. But also, it'd be really good with barbecued chicken, as long as you didn't cover it in loads of sweet, sticky marinade. But a normal, gorgeous piece of chicken on the grill, bit of charred edges, bit of smokiness. This will stand up to it, and it'd just be a fantastic.
I'd quite like it with a bit of salmon with the same treatment as well, actually.
Yeah, totally agree. Salmon and Chardonnay are fantastic.
Yeah, I've got some smoked salmon in the fridge if we want to try it.
Yeah, I think.
If only I was there.
Okay. Yeah.
But I know
you get smoked salmon.
Yeah.
It's worth pointing out as well. Those of you that were joined us on the Malbec tasting, we had the Malbec equivalent of this, and just a little bit of background on the people that make it. Hermandad actually means brotherhood, or in this case it's sisterhood as well, and it's a family. It's the siblings of the original owner that make it, and the whole ethos is that they essentially each look after different parcels of vines that like their babies, and then they bring them all together because they're all great as people individually, but as a family they work better. Is that just marketing and warm and fuzzy? I really like that story.
I love a wine family. Love families. Oh,
Yeah.
So wine is a wine
Sorry.
family, bringing the brother and sisterhood together to create something stronger than just having an individual wine from each of them.
yeah. Love a bit of wine family trees. Family.
Yeah.
It's good, isn't it? Would you like to see a picture of them?
Oh, that'd be. Is it with you, Pip? Are you stood
I'll
in
have
there? Or am I in the background somewhere?
Where was it now? Here we are. This one. Oh, it's only a little picture, but you can see that's Franco on the left. Next to him is Fausta. Then it's Francesca, and then it's Florencia on the end.
Are they all siblings, Pip?
Yes,
Lovely.
yes, brothers and sisters. All the Falasco family, all beginning with F, which I think's lovely.
So it's not like Succession. They
What
like
do we
it.
think then? Do we like the Chardonnay?
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm gonna do my usual thing. Just I like the honesty there, Lisa. Thank you. Not sure, but it's not a no. But just thumbs up those who like the Chardonnay, and then keep your thumbs up if you're surprised that you like the Chardonnay. Quite a few. Excellent. As Dan said, Chardonnay's had a bit of a bad reputation, especially when I joined the wine industry 22 years ago. A lot of it was orange, and it was the way that they treated it, often with American oak, that was very heavily
And not
toasted.
even oak barrels, but
Yeah,
like
No, it
chips.
was chips.
Being
Yes,
lowered like a tea bag of chips into the back. I mean, some of those wines were dreadful. They were like
it was.
a dream.
It was like you got wine and a little bit of fruit to begin with, and then something just came in at the side with a two before and slapped you in the jaw. I was like, oh gosh, where did that come from?
They're
Very
not
tannic, very overbearing, very aggressive. But so even if you don't like this wine necessarily, you can at least appreciate that it's one thing. It's very well put together. It's very well textured. It's not it's not spiky. There isn't this shouting at you and then that shouting at you. It's very well. There's a word and I'm struggling to find it. Cohesive. There we are. It's very cohesive.
I might borrow that word. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
It's all yours.
letting the fruit shine, isn't it? So the oak is in the background,
Yeah.
adding things rather than dominating. And it's taken a while for the new world winemakers to get to that level of elegance, I think.
It's it's integrated nicely, isn't it? It just sort of it's there just as a bit of sort of season in the background rather than being the main player. Are you okay there?
But
Yeah, I'm just.
We will never, I will never
People
convert.
keep writing things that make me giggle. That no, I haven't, but I will. I will do it right now, Lyndon. I promise.
We will never persuade everybody to love Chardonnay. There will always be some people that won't like it, and that's absolutely fair enough. But I always say just give it a chance in its different styles because it is a chameleon, and there's never any one style of Chardonnay. I mean, Chardonnay is one of the great champagne grapes, of course.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I've used that one before. No, you can't have my champagne because you don't like Chardonnay.
Yes. So you don't like Blanc de Blanc champagne? That's a shame.
Or mine. I've also done that with vegetarians. Apologies if Eddie was a vegetarian, but I have a friend who I think it's more flexitarian, I think is the best way to put it. And at Christmas, I make it like it's like a puff pastry and pesto Christmas tree that you twist it and then you tear it off and dip it into something. It's really yummy. But she wouldn't eat that because I'd used Parmesan, but she would have my champagne. It's like, well, no, it's both or neither, actually. Because the champagne isn't vegetarian either, darling, but there we are.
Oh.
Just on the point from Chris as well. So obviously Polini Montrachet, yes, or yeah. But
do you sell a Polini Montrachet for £22?
we don't. That's the that's the problem.
10 cases.
Or a Merceau, unfortunately. That's my favourite, but there we are.
Yes.
Yes, is everyone happy with the whites that we've covered? Are there any questions or comments that people want to add or ask?
If you know where to look, Chris,
Oh, well, Chris has got to tell us some secrets next. We want that. Shall we pop on to the reds? And if Dan and Susie want to start talking about it, I will find my map and then I can talk about
so
the maps.
I
Can't believe we've got to the third wine and I haven't showed you a map yet.
the main component in this is Bonarda. So Bonarda is potentially what they think will be the sort of, or is the second most planted variety in Argentina after Malbec. So we obviously know Argentina for Malbec, but Bonarda is sort of the second great. Now, Bonarda has a history which starts in France, and in France it's called Douce Noire. Or it was called Douce Noire, and it was mostly found in the Savoyard region, so up in the mountains in the Alps, and that's where it started life. And then and so it's quite well adapted to all the things we were talking about before, like the diurnal temperature differences. It performs well where you have these big differences between day and night, but it has quite often been used, as we're doing here, as a blend. But more and more, I think you are finding it in Argentina in its own right as well.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of its main role is to act as a rather more soft,
yeah,
and likable when young, easy, lush, ripe kind of grape variety. It doesn't tend to give very heavy tannins, does it?
No. So Douce Noire, which was the original name, translate as sweet black. So that's the literal translation of it. So yeah, it's that idea that it's giving you that slightly softer, slightly maybe sweeter fruit, rather than the big grippy tannins that you might get with other varieties.
It is worth pointing out as well, following on from that there is a grape variety in Italy, or actually a range. There's actually 6 grapes that all fit into the Bonarda category, which are nothing to do with this one. In Italy, you can find a sparkling red wine that's made from Bonarda, or they call it Bonarda, but it's actually made from a grape that originates in Croatia. And there is also a wine that they call Bonarda that's actually made with something called Uva Rara. So it's nothing to do with Bonarda. It's very confusing wine sometimes. But if it's Bonarda from Argentina, it will be Douce Noire.
Well, and also, just to confuse things even further, Pip, so Douce Noire,
please, always
which translate as sweet black, has in the past been confused for dolcetto, which also translates as sweet one. Yes.
Sweet little sweet one, yes.
And they're very, so in terms of where you would have originally found this Douce Noire, which was in the Alps, in the Savoyard region, dolcetto, you're not very far away, just sitting over in Piemonte. So understand that people confuse the two, but no, they're not related either.
Makes sense.
Yes.
It's a pity with Bonanza.
Seriously, I thought you said you were driving.
But I know I'm driving. But, it's very upsetting. But yeah, Bonarda, the problem with it as a kind of consumer journalist was a lot of it went straight onto the supermarket shelves maybe 10 years ago as very, very cheap Argentinian red. And done badly is like, you get a bit of pear drop, you get a kind of nasty rusticity, bit of sour tomato, not nice. So if your first experience of Argentinian Bonarda was a 4.49 bottle of rubbish, that's such a shame, because it's a lovely, lovely grape, and it gives this lovely, pretty, very fruity profile when it's done properly like this. And blended, indeed.
Yes, yeah. So just on that one, so this is, although the main component is Bonarda, it is blended. And as I say, it's pretty common that would be done in France where it originated from. But this is, in this instance, it's been blended with Cabernet Sauvignon, and I think just a little splash of Malbec as well.
A little bit of Malbec.
Yeah.
Dan, could you let us know the vintage ABV? And I'm to answer Chris's question about would it reckon it would age? I'm not sure it would, to be fair. I think right now, what I'd be looking for a wine that would age would be quite hefty, quite hearty fruit, high acidity, high alcohol, and just a really, really firm structure. This, to me, just feels like it's designed to be drunk and enjoyed while it's a bit younger, while it's still got freshness and vibrancy. Yeah,
it's kind of soft and lush. I think you meant to enjoy all that lovely black cherry flavour.
Yeah. This one, the one that we're drinking tonight is 20, although we have now moved on to 21.
It's got a couple of years, but I don't think it could last too much longer.
21 is the current vintage. So, I mean, we've just very recently moved on to the 21. This is just the last of the 20 stock. So, yeah, it's not something that you would, want to put down and
have it with some salami. That will help.
Well, it works quite nicely, I think, with the
empanadas. Really good.
You have it with empanadas.
And the
Right.
ABV is 13%, so you asked that question as well. So just that's there. And in terms of the price, this is $7.99 mixed 6. So this is, I think, the best value wine we
I
have.
have noticed that.
Yeah.
That's superb.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
then,
that's so nice to see, Sue, so that you really enjoyed it and you didn't realise how entry level
no,
it is.
actually genuinely hadn't focused on the price for this one. When I was making notes before I came, I didn't know the prices even. But that's amazing good value. So no one should ever be buying those rubbish, cheap supermarket bonanza. No, be buying this for a couple of quid more.
But that's, I think, right. I mean, that's a good point for those that don't know, and I don't think it's something that we've talked about. I probably have, because I bang on about these things a lot. But just in terms of what you get, you know, when you get your bottle of wine, you spend £5 on a bottle of wine. Straight away, off that £5, £2.23 goes on duty, and another £1, 20% goes to VAT. So £3.23 of your £5 bottle of wine immediately goes to the exchequer, which only leaves you with £1.77 to actually go into the making of the wine, the glass bottle, the transport, the marketing, the label, the market.
I was going to say that the transport's probably about 50-60p a bottle, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you're left, you know, you're probably left with about 30 pence
About
going
30p
to the winemaker. You know, if you just move up here, so we're just going up by £3 to £8. Well, the £2.23 doesn't change. So you've still got £2.23 going to duty. Your VAT is now going up, so it's still 20%. So you're looking at £1.60. But what it actually does is it means you end up with an awful, it's not, you know, going up incrementally, it's actually going up exponentially because of that £2.23 not changing. So you end up with about £2 here going to the winemaker rather than 30p, just for that extra £3 spend. So it's all
on the same extrapolation. If you go up to £10 a bottle, you've suddenly got somewhere close to £3.50, £4 worth of wine. So you've doubled the amount that you're paying, but you've potentially tenfolded the actual value of the wine in the bottle.
Oh.
So if you've got the choice and you can do the extra 50p a pound, it's always worth doing it. I'm loving that people are trying this with pizza and salami and chorizo. This is marvelous.
Yeah, where's the pizza?
We need pizza. That's one thing Dan didn't cook today.
You know, I might look in the fridge because I think there is some cold
Go
pizza.
get pizza. While you look for pizza.
When I went as a journalist to Argentina, it's quite a long time ago now, but I did a big press trip there. There is a huge Italian population in Mendoza, and a lot of Italian food, Italian restaurants. We ate in really classic, traditional Italian tracks in Mendoza. And yeah, you know, spag bowl is great with Bonarda, pizza as well. I mean, it goes with tomatoes, basically. It's soft and juicy enough to go with tomatoes. So all those lovely, easy Italian dishes suddenly come into their own.
Yeah.
And actually, with mine being at my room temperature, which somebody just commented on, it looks sunny here. It's bloody cold though. It's been raining all day. The sun's come out in the evening a little bit, but mine is definitely not what we would consider room temperature. It's cooler, and it's absolutely delicious for it because you've kept the freshness of the fruit. It's yummy.
You're drinking the wine in the temperature that people would always have been drinking wine until recent years, where we're all 20 cranked up to 22 degrees. So the wine
put it on the radiator and cook the fruit out of it. That's what we want to do, isn't it?
Don't do that, people.
That's not what we want to do. No. So,
but I mean, really, at $7.99, you have a jolly good pizza with that. That would be a cracking supper.
Yeah, really good. Why can't I get rid of that? There we are.
So
just as a, I don't know if
you got your map up because everyone's disappointed we haven't had them.
No, I will do a map. Please don't microwave it ever. That's wrong. Wrong, Christopher. Just to sort of put it into some context, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, so hopefully you can still see me. The Brits tend to drink white wine straight out the fridge at sort of 2 to 3 degrees, and we drink red wine at room temperature, sort of somewhere between 20-22 degrees. But actually, if you go to where the wine is made, they will usually have the white wine more like 10 degrees and the red wine more like 14 degrees. So actually we drink our wine on the wrong ends of the spectrum. They should be much closer together in terms of temperature. Personal taste, as always, is paramount. but it's worth just trying. Your white's a little bit less cold than you might, and your red's a little bit cooler than you might. You might find different nuances and new flavours. But I'm going to show you a map now, because I know you've all been waiting.
I don't think we should have the last thing on the chat room. Someone's Christopher saying microwave it.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Something else in the chat room, quick.
No. I think he's doing that to push buttons, I think, actually. He knows us too well, clearly. So here we have South America. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, good. You can see my screen. So Uruguay, we touched on what wine bits are around the south coast. Now, where is my...
Always extraordinary.
Sorry, I just need to move that out of the way. That's why I couldn't find the zoom in button. There we are. We're going to zoom straight in to Argentina, and we're going straight to head to Mendoza. So the one that we've just had is sort of sourced more around the valley floor where it's a bit warmer. So they're just growing beautifully full and juicy and fruity and fresh. That's what we like. We are going to head into the town here, Tunulan, if that's how you pronounce it. We need someone Spanish to tell me how to pronounce this properly. And Tunulan gives its name to a river which starts high up in the mountains, way up in the Andes, and then it flows through, and that is what then becomes the Uco Valley. So all this is the Uco Valley. And you can see where the really fertile bits are, because they're the really, really good bits at the bottom where produce is made. And then as you get further up towards the mountains, you can see all the vineyards here. And I found one earlier that was really, really pretty. I bet I can't find it again now. It was so pretty.
And I think if you think about anywhere where wine is grown, so think about the regions that wine is grown in, quite often it's valleys. And if you imagine sort of standing and looking up the valley, you'll often find that there is this sort of sweet spot, as Pip's saying there, just as you're coming up the slope. And it's that sort of, as you come up the slope and that sort of mid slope where you get the best environment, the best conditions for growing grapes. And that's where quite often here in the Uco Valley, but if you were to look at any of the well-known valleys for making wine, you'd find a very similar story of the vineyards would all be sitting in this sort of middle ground, which is the best place where the soil level is the right depth of soil, the sun is the right amount of sun, it's all the conditions are just perfect for the
and then
grapes.
Within that, the lower ones are the ones you need to get the ripeness, so the big reds,
yeah,
and up the lightest whites further up for aroma.
Yeah.
But these, I love this particular little snapshot, because this is really, I'll just zoom out a little bit so you can get the context. These are really up. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing at my screen and just covering my camera. You can really see how close they are to the mountains here, and they would have started off as being experimental to see what happens.
I think your hand might be in front of your microphone, Pip. You're a bit muffled.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe I was blocking it with my hand. And then you come in a bit further and just look at the uniformity of these. This is so pretty, and this is 4 separate bodegas, so 4 separate wineries that have all.
Doesn't look real.
That's extraordinary.
It looks.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
To be real.
It's absolutely gorgeous, and how they've sort of crafted their vines around their bodega, and it's just sorry, I'm a map nerd. I think it's really really interesting when you see actually how they're all laid out. It's
all irrigated, presumably.
Yes, all from we're talking like semi-arid desert here. So they have built channels coming down from the Andes, so they catch the meltwater that comes down, and that's the reason you're able to grow vines here.
Oh.
Just sort of drip feed it very very slowly.
It does, Lyndon, look like a paint colour chart. It doesn't look real, does it?
I haven't seen that. It does.
Yeah.
But that's, you can see that the vines are in the sort of inhospitable bits, and then where it's green, much more greener towards the town, that's where you're going to get more of your produce and your vegetables and fruit growing, because they want fertility there, whereas up in the mountains for vines you want things to be not quite so fertile, so the grapes have to really force their roots down to find new nutrients.
Poor old vines.
Poor vines, I know. But it is interesting that apart from the Estampado that we've just had, all of the wines that we've had today have been from the Uco Valley, or the Argentinian ones, I should say. And that's sort of what we wanted to show you. Yes, there's wine from down in Patagonia, and there's wine from, we could do a whole new thing on wine regions of Argentina. There's Salta towards the north, where you get lots of Torrentes. But we just sort of wanted to really home in on one area. And this is the diversity you get there. We did it last month with this is the diversity of one grape variety. Now we're doing sort of one area and the diversity you can find within it. And we should all just go one day, I think. It's the best way to explore, don't you think?
You're going to have a pizza.
Yeah.
We're going to find a trattoria.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll find my little sort of dusty gaucho just off horseback lighting a fire.
Rosa Farrenball Bonarda could be one of the paint. I think that's a great paint name.
Yeah.
We're doing the drawing room in Bonarda.
Bonarda. I like that. I will find my gaucho one day, don't you worry.
There was a comment from Alison just about the hail. So lots of hail in the region. So
yes, they do.
Level 3 on Sunday. Level 3 answer on exam on Sunday. So
excellent.
Having to learn.
Yeah. Funny enough, I found a picture with netting and I didn't include it. But when I was looking through to find pictures for you all, there was so bear in mind that the vines are probably about yay high, and they had all this black netting over, and the guy was hunched over, like walking through the vines like this, because he couldn't actually stand up because of the netting. It's a very good point. Actually, I was in Piemonte last week. Was it only last week?
Yes, it was.
It was last week. Good Lord. And they all had netting across there, but for a very different reason. I'm digressing ever so slightly, but it's an interesting point. They had netting, whereas the netting that you're talking about goes across the vines to stop the hail getting in. This netting was going along the vines vertically, and it was to try and stop the caterpillars. Because in Piemonte, honestly, it was fascinating. In Piemonte, they grow, it's where Barolo is, and Barbaresco, and these really famous wines that all rely on Nebbiolo. Springtime, the buds start to burst. And the caterpillars love it because they're full of sugars and they're really, really juicy. So the caterpillars come along the vines and they nibble all the buds off. And normally, with most grape varieties, that's not a problem, because once the bud's gone, they will grow another one. They'll burst through another one. But with Nebbiolo, they don't regrow their buds. You've got one chance. So people literally go out between 8 in the evening and midnight and go collecting caterpillars, which I think is brilliant. They literally just walk through the vine with a bucket of caterpillars. There we are. And then the good wineries then take them up into the forest and they release them in the forest.
What do the bad wineries do?
I'm not going to tell you.
Special risotto.
But let's just say that we'll have fewer butterflies this year.
Gamont caterpillar risotto.
No, fewer butterflies. That's all.
Yeah. It's
But I'm not coming to that tasting.
But it's an interesting point that why pests and things that can ruin crops are quite important, and it's a good comment.
Hail is really
deep fried. That would be cool. Do you know, we should get more protein from insects, frankly, so that's probably not a good shout, Alison.
I think
not
there's a bad shout founded there with the caterpillars.
Yes. Yeah.
But my son is working and his gap here in New Zealand at the moment, and he's just finished picking on Piki Island. And they have amazing birds' nests, which are like drapes. They look like veils over them.
Yes. So they have massive problems with birds there, don't they? I remember visiting.
Sorry, just before you start that one, Pip, can I just ask, because I was given some mild abuse earlier for the equivalent of name dropping, which is photo dropping. What's the equivalent for I've been to?
Well, my son is working
travel bragging.
Travel bragging. Yeah,
it's a travel brag. Yes, no, that's fair. But when I was in New Zealand and met Brent Maris, don't you know? But
darling.
To combat the birds there, they just bought a breeding pair of falcons instead.
Oh, wow.
That's how they combat birds.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Certainly in Australia, they have really booming cannons. I mean, it rather does spoil the winery restaurant moment when you're jumping out of your seat because the cannons have gone off right beside you. But anyway, we digress. But there are major issues, aren't there, with birds and hail, and I didn't know about the caterpillars, so thank you for that.
There you go. No, that's something I learned last week as well, so I'm telling everybody who'll listen, frankly.
Anyway.
Oh, excellent. Please do, Christopher. Oliver LaFlave. Brilliant. I think Oliver's just won on the name dropping stakes. Sorry, Christopher's just won on the name dropping. Shall we move on?
Was he selling you a £20 bottle of Collini Montrachet?
That's how Christopher gets his £20 Montrachet.
That's how he does it.
So,
right, Los Haroldos. We're moving on to Cabernet Franc, and this is another wine that Dan and I found quite recently, and we both sort of take. I should point out at this point, those of you who know Dan know he loves Beaujolais and often quite light, juicy reds. My taste is I like those things, but I probably would more towards quite hefty, quite chewy, quite complex, weighty wines. That's more my thing. So to go to a tasting together and for us to both taste the same thing and look at each other and go, it's actually not bad. It's quite a rare thing and quite a special thing. So that's what happened when we both tasted this one, for very different reasons. I might add. I liked it because it's big and juicy. Dan liked it because it's quite soft and elegant.
Quite soft and elegant and fruity, yes.
Yeah, that it's amazing how
it manages to be all those things.
Yeah, it's amazing how one grape variety can encapsulate so many different things. And one of my favourite wines that you don't see very often in the UK is Chinon, or another wine called San Nicolas de Bourgogne. And they're both made from Cabernet Franc in the Loire Valley, which is where its heartland is. And they're sort of,
I was going to say, Susy's just agreeing with you, and I was just going to say, it's one of the, I think, the major grape varieties. It's planted in so many places. I mean, we can see that here with Argentina, but it's planted, throughout the world. But it's very rare to find it as a single variety.
Yeah.
So we're much more
Bordeaux.
When it's in a blend.
In most Bordeaux, there will be an element of Cabernet Franc. Yeah, in most Bordeaux, there'll be an element of Cabernet Franc, but to see it by itself is unusual, apart from the Loire Valley, where you see it quite a lot.
As well. I think
it's what, sorry?
Saumur Champagny. Those Loire Cabernets are wonderful, wonderful wines. And what I get from this variety often, and I get it here too, is it's kind of raspberry leaf. It's like you're brushing through the fruit plants, and there's a bit of leafiness as well with that gorgeous raspberry. It's really, really lovely, great variety. Big fan of Cabernet Franc.
It's that sorry.
I really put a lot of food in my mouth. Carry on.
To just say yes, he agrees with Susie. He thinks that it's got this lovely sort of leafiness.
Well, it's not green stalky. I believe it's just like you're in among the currant and raspberry bushes picking the fruit, and there's that sort of greenness around you as well.
But it's so dark at the same time. It's
dark and brooding, isn't it?
It is. There's some. It's like what was it I described it as once, Dan? It's like Red Riding Hood. It starts off really quite pretty and floral and fun, and actually there's something quite sinister lurking in the undergrowth.
So I'm just reading Alison's comment. She said, "Oops, I finished my Los Haroldos and I'm."
We all have had that affliction sometimes, Alison. Don't worry.
Friday night.
Yeah. But it's, I think, again, it shows us the diversity that you can get within Argentina, doesn't it? We're going from that sort of very fruity, very sort of easy drinking Bonarda blend that we just had. We're now going on to something that's actually, it's quite serious. There's lots going on here with this sort of single varietal Cabernet Franc, a variety that you don't, like we say, you don't see in many places by itself, but it's showing the the real potential that this has in Argentina.
And to add to that as well, if I may, Dan, the vineyards here were only planted in the 1990s. So give them another 10, 20 years when we're properly old vine, and just to see what it will do with that complexity and that density and the weight and just the quality of fruit will be completely different. But it's worth pointing out the reason why this is reserve is A, because it's the best vineyards, but also because it's had 70% of it was in second fill oak barrels, and the rest of it was in new oak barrels. So you've got old French, but you've got this wonderful layers of texture that you've got from the new wood and the aged wood, just giving it more roundness and complexity. Yeah, it is quite tannic on the tongue, but I think when you have food with it, it's I don't think I'd ever recommend Cabernet Franc as one of those just sitting watching telly wines. It's a bit more serious than that. It needs food. It needs something to go with it.
It's really, really good with the steak because that lovely spice tannin, lovely use of oak, which on its own, you know, is quite big, but with food, it just mellows out.
And as we are in Argentina, we've also got some chimichurri to go with it. I'm not sure how that's going to work, so I'm going to try the steak by itself. And then I'm going to add.
Craig and I have just had it with Stilton, so
yeah,
we really like it.
That's great.
It is good, and I had it with a bit of salami and a mini pork pie.
Mini pork pie. Well, there you go. That's your coronation picnic sorted, isn't it? Everyone's going to be.
I clearly had a very busy couple of days. I just couldn't face cooking, so I bought picnic food at M&S. So
it works really well with the steak, actually.
It works.
Of course it does.
With the plain steak. I'm just trying it with the
steak with the chimichurri.
Right. Chimichurri is a strong flavour, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Can I show you pictures, please?
I think I went a bit heavy on the vinegar with the chimichurri.
Never mind. Right, first picture to show you here. Oh, it's a bit distorted. I don't quite know what happened there.
Yeah.
This is a picture of the family that make this wine, that own this winery. It's a little bit distorted and squished. I'm not sure why. But do you recognise anybody?
So is that Don Lolo in the middle who used to go in?
This is Don Lola in the middle, aka Haroldos Santos.
Sorry.
And the people to the side of him, well, this lady and these two, I don't know where the other one's gone, there's meant to be another one, are his grandkids, who are Falasco, Franco, Florencia and Fausto.
Oh.
This is the Falasco family again.
Right. Okay.
They own this winery as well.
Wow,
but
okay. Yeah.
The story behind this one, I just need to find another picture, is that so Don Loca, Haroldos, the original Haroldo, he used to make his own wine, and he would go around the town on a push bike and literally sell the wine out of the front of his bike. And if I can get this to work, is my thinking face on? That's his old bike, which I just think is a really lovely picture. Isn't it cute? With all the little wines in the front of it. And you know I like a picture with mountains. So I'm going to show you one of those as well. Because I've also got this one, which is Harvest Time in Los Haroldos.
I clearly enjoyed this one because I finished it and we haven't
I
finished
know, I'm getting that way as well. That's good.
It was really interesting to taste it on its own, but it absolutely comes into its own with the steak. It's brilliant with the steak. And the lovely raspberry plummy, very plummy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So red plum fruit goes so well with it, with the steak. Thanks.
But just to go back to the map that we showed you earlier, just seeing how close it is to the mountains.
Yeah, no, look at that.
And actually back-breaking work, picking grapes. We think it's a nice day out picking grapes. It's really not. It's very hard work.
What's quite interesting there actually is the height of the vines. When you look, you know, with the person as the sort of the reference, how high the vines are.
I thought it was sitting down.
But bear in mind that, so yes, the vines will grow up to about here, but where the fruit drops is, I can't get high enough, is about waist height, sort of waist to collarbone height. It's that area where your grapes will grow, and then the actual vines are higher.
Sorry, Susie's just feeding the dog.
Lucky Hugo.
Yes, that's it. It'd be Susie's best friend. He'll never
One
leave.
like that at home.
Yeah, he'll know as soon as she walks through the door. Now, it's the lady that gives me steak. She can kill him.
Chris, if they're not eating pork pies in Argentina, they're missing out, frankly.
And for Lyndon, so the ABV on this one is 14.5.
So that's
It's good.
I mean, I think I'd decant this as well. Not just to be poncy, but I would decant it because it will just immediately aerate.
Please be poncy.
No, okay. But do you think? I mean, this is a real candidate for decanting, I would say.
It is a good one. It's worth pointing out as well. So Cabernet Franc, you often find it in the cooler climate. So the fact that this is more higher altitude, that's very bad England, but you know what I mean. Higher altitude, and the fact that it grows very well. Altitudinous, yes. It's greater altitudinous. Oh, pork pie top with Stilton. Now you're talking. I'm going to try that in a minute. Sorry, distracted by food again. The vineyards are more altitudinous. Likewise in the Loire, the vineyards are quite cool.
Altitudinous.
Altitudinous.
Altitude. Susie is complaining as a journalist that it's altitudinous is not a no. It's not a word. No,
it is a word. It is now. It's altitudinous, but it likes being a little bit cooler, which is why it hasn't worked in inverted commas as an international variety as much as things like Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon have, which do prefer hotter conditions, and it actually ripens about 1 to 2 weeks earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon does. So it's better suited to cooler climates because you don't need to keep it as long. Yes, Dan?
Sorry, just because you mentioned Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon.
Cabernet Sauvignon.
To give you a fun fact about Cabernet Franc, which is that Cabernet Franc is one of the parents of.
That's what I was going to say next.
And Merlot.
So Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc were crossed to produce Cabernet Sauvignon.
Which I was thinking weird because it's so Sauvignon-y.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. Sometimes when you get a good Cabernet Sauvignon, sometimes you get a real sort of green pepper, very vegetal note to it. And I think that comes partly from the Sauvignon and partly from the Cabernet. But no, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. But then I guess that's the other parent, isn't it? Maybe that comes from. But also, other great variety that is Cabernet Franc is the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon. I don't know. And
don't know.
Carmenere.
Oh, Carmenere.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes. So Cabernet Franc.
Carmenere and so Cabernet Franc and what makes Carmenere?
I don't know. I can't remember what the other parent is, but Carmenere, one half of Carmenere is from Cabernet Franc. So, been quite promiscuous in its life, Cabernet Franc.
It's about.
Yes.
Christopher's helping with my grammar as well. The word is high that I'm looking for.
It's neither vertiginous nor altitudinous. It's just high.
That's altitudinous. Thank you.
Journalist
So,
approved.
Before we move on though, just a quick one. So I made a couple of notes here, which was just the sort of potential that Cabernet Franc has in Argentina, and it has been seen as being possibly the grape that's going to show the best, going to do its best in Argentina, not necessarily in terms of volume, which we know is Malbec, but just in terms of what's going to produce the highest quality wines. And so it has been described as the handsome superhero of Mendoza, having been used to make wines which have scored 97 points from Robert Parker. So there's a wine that scored 97 points from Robert Parker, made from just a single variety of Cabernet Franc. And then also it sort of scored fairly highly with Tim Aitken as well in recent tastings, where he's scored 95 points plus for single variety and Cabernet Franc from Argentina. So some of the critics are finding really impressive examples of Cabernet from Argentina. So it could well have a very interesting future there. So one to keep your eyes on. So, shall we move on to the final wine?
Look what's happening.
Oh, sorry, pork pie and Stilton. Let's hit the
pork pie
and
I
Stilton.
can confirm.
Yes.
It's quite belting. It works.
Do you actually have any wine left to try it with?
I have a little bit. Yeah, I've only been pouring a tiny bit.
Oh, right.
So then I can go back to it later. You see.
Fair enough. Yes. Right. Shall we move on to wine number 6?
Can I just ask?
course.
The three of us have been banging on about how much we like that. Is it just us, or do other people like it as well? Hooray! Craig's partner, I don't know your name, but 2 thumbs up. Fantastic. Yes? Not so much? I think from that we can conclude the people that liked it really liked it. People that aren't sure aren't sure.
Rosie said lots of thumbs up there. It's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rosie. Really good.
I saw
Isn't that
Craig
interesting?
thumb up then as well, which was yeah. And I think for I mean the price, say £17.10 for mix 6. So for a dinner party wine, you know, especially like we say, having steak, having a nice steak, sort of, you know, having friends over, I think it's something that would be really brilliant for that sort of occasion.
It's that kind of occasion. This is not an everyday wine. It's something you have when friends come over and you showing off with your lovely steaks, barbecued or otherwise.
Yes, yeah. Just the 14. Sorry, Chris. Not much we can do about that. The 14.5%. I would say it's probably just in terms of the price, given that the duty rates are due to change in August. Sort of any of the high alcohol wines probably worth stocking up on now if you like them before the price shoots up, because the Treasury is taking more of a cut from August.
Good chat.
Yeah. So
Final wine.
Wine number 6.
Well, let's rephrase that. It's the final wine that we're going to talk about with you. What you do after this is entirely up to you.
But yeah, so the wine number 4 had just a splash of Malbec in it. So we are sort of trying to show you more of Argentina than just Malbec. This one is Malbec forward. So this is leading with Malbec. We've got another blend here now. And this is 42% Malbec. And then there is Cabernet Sauvignon and Tempranillo are the other 2 grapes. So in terms of sort of showing you the diversity of Argentina, I mean, Tempranillo, who would have thought? But then it makes sense, doesn't it? I guess it's why wouldn't they try Tempranillo?
Yeah. Very interesting.
Ah, there you go. Crossing of Cab Franc and Gros Cab. Yeah, I knew it was the lost grape of Bordeaux. Didn't know it was a crossing. There we are. Everyone's learning this evening. Thank you, Alison.
But yeah, so
wow.
And this,
and just to point out, if anyone's unsure why people stay in the wine trade so long, it's because of that. It's literally every day you learn something new. I don't think we ever. I don't know if I'm speaking for all of us, but certainly me. I don't think. A lot of my friends and colleagues sort of say, "Oh, my God, you know so much about wine." It's like, yeah, but I probably have just scratched the surface. Do you have to have that humility?
So even if you knew everything, next year everything would be different.
It would change, exactly. It's fascinating how much there is to learn. It certainly sounds like it, Alison. You've got fantastic knowledge, and you're absorbing it. You're a sponge. That's the difference.
Well, I think it was new to you actually the day that we were talking about it. I can't remember where we were now, but I was chatting to a friend of mine who he's out making these really interesting wines all over the world. He's got 6 projects going on at the moment where he's making these interesting wines, and one of the things he's working on, one of the projects, is peewees, which are these new clones that are supposed to be disease resistant. So,
I'm glad you said that. I thought it was.
Yeah, there's nothing like a shiwi.
So we might just need Pip to talk for a little while whilst we mute ourselves.
Hello, Alice. Right, yes, hi. This is another one that Dan and I found recently, because often when you get Malbec from Argentina, it can be very aggressive. It can be very, very tannic, especially the higher altitude you go, the more it literally grows a thick skin to survive against the elements. So what they often do to night Alice and Barnaby, what they often do to soften that tannin is to use oak. But this guy, I should say he's called Karim Musi is his name. He said, well, no, I don't want to use oak to soften my grapes. I want this wine to be entirely about the fruit. He wants to have complete, yes, oak, thank you. Oak for non-Yorkshire people. He wanted to have complete free reign. the beauty of this part of Argentina, I showed you it on the map. They can just keep planting wherever they want to plant at the moment. It's not like the demarcated areas of Europe where you have to grow your grapes in a very specific area. Uco Valley is Uco Valley, but where you plant an Uco Valley is still up to you. Where you source your grapes from is still up to you. So he has this amazing freedom of where and how he wants to make wine. He's not limited by rules and regulations. And so because of that, he has decided to not use oak on this one. He's used very select vineyards. And in order to soften the tannins, but it all be about the fruit, is he's used concrete tanks. And that's why it's called the concrete tank, which they did tell us, didn't they, Dan, when they released this wine, it was just before.
Timing was not perfect.
It was just about February last year.
Just as the invasion of Ukraine was happening.
Just when Russia decided to invade Ukraine. So I thought, oh gosh, is the concrete tank going to be a good name for a wine right now? But they persevered with it, because often when you've got a very well-made wine that's been used with oak, it can enhance it. It can help with the development. It can really just marry together. It can be very, very cohesive. When it's done badly, often the oak can overpower the fruit, and you lose a lot of that delicious, ripe primary fruit quality. And that is exactly what he wants to achieve on this. So even if you just stick your nose in first, it's just cherries and plums just bursting out, almost like tinned plum tomatoes.
Get a bag of squishy black cherries.
Yeah,
gorgeous black cherries.
It's all about the fruit, but then when you taste it, the texture is so smooth. And this is no oak whatsoever. This is just rested. It's slept in concrete tanks for a year, just to let everything marry together and everything soften down. And I've honestly, this afternoon, I have scoured the internet to try and find you a picture of the concrete tanks, and I couldn't find one. But I've seen them in like really old traditional ones in Italy, and it's almost like a communal bath that you see in the football changing room. That's the kind of shape and size that we're talking. It's a sort of maybe 4 to 6 foot deep, maybe deeper, and sort of 10 foot.
I'd say
it's just maybe 10.
It's probably about the size of a kitchen, isn't it? If you think about,
my small kitchen, or a bathroom, perhaps.
Substantial things, and you go to, especially in France, you go around in Beaujolais, which is very, but concrete tanks are very typical in Beaujolais, and you go there, and they've been there for probably 40 years, 50 years, these concrete tanks. But they are sizable,
quite something,
vessels, and quite often they'll fill them from the top, so they'll have holes in the top that they can, they have sort of a pump that comes in, and they fill them from the top, and then at the bottom they have a little door where they and a tap, and so they have to go into them, to clean them before they use them, and so they go through this little door at the bottom, they get in with their brush and they clean them, and they're quite immense.
The other flavour I'm getting on this, which I think is quite a rare flavour, definitely black cherry, but the flavour of damson. Damson gin, much sweeter and slow. And I've made damson jam, and this is damsony, and it's a glorious, quite autumnal, kind of juicy.
It's like a really dark, like deep dark plum almost, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly so. Yeah.
You were saying it was all about the fruit, Pip. I think the thing that you get from the concrete tanks is terroir as well. So it really showcases the terroir. I think, so for those that maybe don't know, so terroir is it's a French term, but we use it a lot in wine, and it's encapsulating the environment, the microclimate, the culture, just everything about the way that the wine is made. And sometimes when you can taste two wines from the same region, and they can taste very different. And quite often that can be down to the winemaking rather than the terroir. So if someone's chosen to use oak and someone hasn't, that will produce a very different wine. If everybody's making their wine in concrete tank, because the concrete doesn't impart any flavors to the wine, it really strips it back down to those very basics. And so the differences that you get will be coming in a lot of instances from the terroir, so from the exposition, from the soil, from the, you know, all of the things that contribute to how the grapes grow.
What do you think? What's people's comments?
The chili.
Multiple thumbs up from Christopher.
Well, there's not heavy tannins back in it. I think that's the thing.
So we've got the steak. And so with the first one, the steak and the chimichurri didn't really work with the Cabernet Franc. The chimichurri was overpowering, but with this one, actually the chimichurri.
So this number 6 is
fresher.
Something spicy. It's coping with spice and vinegar, and you know, I'd even have this with something like a lamb rogan josh, you know, really nice medium spicy Indian curry like that.
Mm. Yeah, and Alison, your comment about the mineralogy, I like that, is exactly what Dan's just mentioned. It's really taking from the land, it's taking from the soil where it's grown, and actually the concrete tanks is enhancing that rather than hiding it. Oh,
I'm sorry, Elaine, you're getting a headache.
Sorry, Elaine. Drink more water. That's the key. Definitely. Good.
So I think Simon, very nice. Yeah, help yourself. Yeah,
Simon is very nice, I'm sure.
Simon is very nice. But no, I think so. What should we have a as we often do in these?
Yes.
Unless we were getting that on demand, but shall we? If not, shall we find out what the favourites were from the evening?
And as I always say, you can have as many favourites as you like, because you could favourite all of the wines for completely different reasons.
They're very diverse, aren't they? It's quite hard.
Very diverse. And thank you, Susie. I'm glad you've said that, because that's exactly what we wanted to try and show, that it's not all about Malbec and Urk, and there's a lot of aromatic whites going on. There's a lot of different winemaking techniques. So all the reds for Chris, basically.
Alison likes number 5.
First and last. Wow, completely different styles. And this is why it's so interesting. 5 and 6.
For Alison, yeah. Susie, what would you pick out as your
2 and 5, 5, 3, 6?
Can I just say 3? I think that's an exceptional Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Price in particular, it's just delicious. 5 is extremely well made, and 6 is absolutely likable.
Yeah.
So I think those 3 for me.
Yeah.
I can have 3.
Excellent.
I don't know. You allowed 3?
You're allowed 3 for different reasons, as Pip says. I'm just going to go for 1. So I'm just going to go for number 5. For me, number 5, the Cabernet Franc. Yeah, I think it's got that lovely balance of fruit, elegance, but depth as well. And it's, I think, one that would at a nice dinner party, you bring that out. The bottle looks nice as well. I know I haven't got a bottle today, but the bottle looks nice as well. You put it on the table. And everybody would be happy with that.
What about you?
I'm going to go for very, very different reasons. 1, 3, 5, and 6.
1, 3, 5, and 6. 4.
All for completely different reasons, because they're just so different. The Albarino, I thought that just the texture and the foodability of that is amazing. I agree that the Chardonnay is
Is foodability a word, Pip?
Probably not, but it is now. Foodability. Steepicity is another one as well. No, the foodability with the Albarino is delicious. The Chardonnay, I agree, is a really good example of what Chardonnay can be. I just loved the smoothness and the sumptuous and the plushness of number 5, and I'm a huge fan of Cabernet Franc, and I don't think we see enough of it, and it's a pity. And the 6, I think, shows a blend extremely well, that you can almost pick out the elements that each of the 3 grapes is giving it without cloaking it behind that sort of mask of oak, which can enhance and help develop, but in this case I think it's done a really good job just to showcase the fruit entirely.
Also, I think if I may say so, if we were to choose, if this was a blind tasting and we were told one of them was from Argentina, only one of them, I'd have picked number 6.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That juicy black cherry just shines through. Those are 2.
But I think what's interesting there is just you have that perception that you of what you think Argentina is,
Yeah,
but actually
there's so much more.
yeah, it can be so much more. So.
And this is again a teeny snapshot. I'm sure there's many more that we could do in different regions, and Patagonia. There's some amazing wines coming out of Patagonia.
We could just do a whole session on Chardonnay.
We'll just have to do more. Join us for the next one.